Hey, welcome to X-Oriente, the new voice of brotherhood. This is your Department of Infernal Affairs. And I am one of your hosts, Eric Diamond.
I'm your other host, Jason Van Dyke. And this is what we call Take 3.
I blame demonic possession.
Ooh, well done. You have won a prize.
Thank you very much. Did I win the internet?
Yep. That's right.
Yeah. So we were talking last week. And by the way, for those who are sticking with us through the first two attempts, thank you very much. We've been talking about all things the devil, and we talked a little bit about sort of the nature of evil, and the last time sort of the nature of angels and demons, and kind of talked about Satan and who Satan was and was, and all that good stuff. I think the next thing we want to talk about is Baphomet. But first, we have a little bit of news. We have a new demon that was discovered. According to the Smithsonian Magazine, this news broke yesterday. I guess if you could call it breaking news. But it's a 2,700-year-old Assyrian tablet. So what you're seeing there, it's not really.
You can do it. You can do it. It almost goes.
Webcam.
It just doesn't want to.
No.
No. We tried.
We'll post a link to the article in the show notes.
Yeah, sure.
Let's see here.
The demon itself, they found it in the back of an Assyrian tablet. They were studying cuneiform text on, and this is from Berlin's for der Statistisch Museum. That is really one of the worst German words I think I've ever seen in my life.
I know.
Vordisch, I can do Vorder.
I'm sure they're like, nobody comes to the museum.
Vorder air.
Don't even bother.
Then it's all S's and vowels. Okay, so that museum, they were studying this tablet, and they found this drawing, a faint drawing on the back, and it turns out it was a drawing, a representation of a demon called Menu. Benu, Bennu, Bennu, and Bennu was a demon acting on the behalf of the Mesopotamian moon god Sin. And apparently, what this demon did is that he caused epilepsy. And so, what this tablet actually was, it was a tablet written by a doctor, and it was actually showing you what the root cause of the illness was, and it was Bennu. So there you go. We found a new demon. A new demon. Every day. It's every day we make a little more headway.
That's right. So let's talk about Baphomet.
Let's talk about Baphomet.
So Baphomet, we see Baphomet. Well, actually, we've been seeing him a lot lately because of the Temple of Satan. So the Temple of Satan has been. Which again, last week we talked about them a little bit. We talked about how they're really not Satan worshipers. They don't really believe in the existence of Satan. They're just using it as a platform to, I guess, make a protest against sort of religious iconography and religious figures in public places. Right. So what they've been doing is creating a statue of Baphomet with like children sort of at Baphomet's knee. It's kind of it would be it's kind of hilarious actually if you look at the statue. It's sort of it's sort of a Hail Santa kind of thing, but yeah, so that's why Baphomet shows up in the news. But oftentimes Baphomet is sort of the demonic figure, I think, probably most linked to Freemasonry. And just so you guys know, this is just for anybody who's watching right now, this is a picture of Baphomet, right? So it's a being that has the torso of a man, the breast of a woman,
Right. It's
the wings of something,
Mm-hmm.
the head of a goat,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
And the feet of a goat,
Mm-hmm.
and hermaphroditic genitals. I think that's kind of what the Asclepius in the middle there is meant to
Portray.
to portray.
Mm-hmm.
Now, having said that, and having shown you the picture of Baphomet, right? Where does he come from? Like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, how does Baphomet kind of come on the scene? And I think the first mention of the phrase Baphomet appears in 1098 in a letter written by a crusader, Anselm of Ribemont,
Mm-hmm.
French crusader. And pretty much scholars agree that Baphomet is a malapropism of the name Muhammad.
Correct. Which fits into our theme from last week, Eric. If you had a takeaway from last week, you would be the winner if your takeaway was all these demons tend to be other people's gods.
Right. Or religious figures. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely. Right.
Our bad guys are the other guys' good guys.
Correct.
Right.
That's absolutely correct. And if that was your takeaway from last week, congratulations, you get a Cupid doll. Because that's probably one of the most important things that we learned, I think. And Baphomet slots right in there, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So,
Mm-hmm.
so let's think about this for a second. So you've got a bunch of Templars, right? And
Mm-hmm.
they are basically living on the Temple Mount.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They appropriated I guess what is Al-Aqsa Mosque,
Mm-hmm.
and mere steps away is one of the holy sites of Islam.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So that means that they're coming into contact with Muslims pretty much on a daily basis, and lots of them, and having to do kind of crowd control and stuff like this. Because one of the things that the Templars did, you know, in order to kind of keep the peace there, was allow pilgrims to come to these holy sites. And
Yeah.
this is one of the major holy sites for Islam,
Mm-hmm.
right? Is
Mm-hmm.
the Dome of the Rock.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, if you weren't knowledgeable and you didn't understand, you know, like if you think about it, you know, the Crusaders who spoke French, right,
Mm-hmm.
go to the Middle East and they're hearing Arabic probably for the first time,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's kind of like when, you know, like when you see those, you know, what are now considered to be kind of racist films of, like, you know, Charlie Chan films where like all Chinese people talk with this accent, you know, and has the chopsaki font,
Right.
you know, like it looks like
Uh-huh.
a bad Chinese menu, right? Like
Right.
it's, you know, we look at it now and go, ooh, you know, but back in those days, right, that was considered, you know, if you wanted to portray Chinese, they all
Mm-hmm.
had coolie hats and they all wore silk pajamas, you know. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
so Baphomet just becomes this sort of, way of saying the word Muhammad,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because like if you actually pronounce Muhammad, and I mean, I don't know Arabic, I don't speak it, but I've heard it pronounced, and it's more like Muhammad,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
To an untrained ear, it could sound like Baphomet,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So Baphomet, like, you know, and here's the thing, like Muhammad, right? If you're listening to that, Muhammad, right, sounds to an English ear, to a Middle English speaker, like Mamet,
Mm-hmm.
which Mamet in Middle English means a false god or an idol, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you were an English, you know, crusader, hearing people, like, you know, praying using the word Muhammad, right, all the time, as in Muhammad is Allah's last and greatest prophet, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is part of the the creed that they say at every, at the beginning of every Muslim prayers, they'll say, there is no God but Allah and Muhammad is his prophet, right? That's the very first thing that they say.
Right.
Right. And so they're thinking like they hear the word and they're thinking, oh, false God or idol. Right. So that's how Muhammad becomes this sort of devilish demonic creature, Baphomet. And then it kind of comes up in the trials of the Templars, right?
Right. After they torture the living hell out of the Templars in France, it kind of comes up there along with a what did they say? It was a three-headed cat statue that they were supposed to have worshipped, and then something else. There was another one that they worshipped, and I can't remember what it was.
Yeah,
but,
some of the testimony. I mean, the testimony was really kind of varied, and that's always a red flag when torture's involved, right?
right.
Like, oh, none of the accounts actually match anything.
Right. Gee, I wonder why.
Yeah. But some said it had the face of a cat, and some said it had three faces, and so they were accused of having a ritual where the Templars were supposed to have knelt before an idol of this Baphomet, kissed its feet, and proclaim Yalla. That's from the testimony, right?
Holla for Yalla.
Well, Yalla.
That's right. Yeah.
Yalla is Allah.
Correct.
Right?
Yep.
So what were they doing? I have a theory.
I do too.
Yeah.
And let's see if it matches. I think that essentially what they were doing is that they were giving their bastardized versions of Islamic prayers and religious practices. And they just sort of blurted out whatever they could, hoping to get away from the torture.
Yeah, mine's a little different.
Okay, what's yours?
All right, so my thing is like, all right, if they're a military order, right?
Okay.
And so they're in a hostile country, and anybody who's been in the military, who has, if you're a fighter pilot, for example, you get trained in this. I actually did a short course in this when I was in ROTC, called SEER, which stands for Survival, Evasion, Resistance, Escape.
Right.
And so one of the things that they teach you in SEER is how to resist an interrogation.
Right.
Right. And so the theory goes is that what these guys were doing was basically training themselves to, when the Muslims would take over a territory, basically you had three choices. You could either convert to Islam, you could die, or you could live as a dhimmi, which is sort of a second-class citizen, but a people of the book. So if you're Christian or Jewish, you're allowed to live, but you were relegated to like a third-class citizen status, and you had to pay a tax.
Right.
Now, if they're if they're invading and they capture you, they don't really give you the option to live as a dhimmi, right? They just basically say, look, you either convert and become one of us or you die. And that was that, right? They didn't really bother ransoming people unless they were like, super well off and things like that. And the Templars, they didn't really have personal wealth, that made them ransomable. And even if they did, what better fate could a Templar have than to be a martyr, right? So they were trained in the art of pretending that they were Muslim until they could escape, right? Without sort of being actually Muslim, without actually converting, right? So they were being trained in how to say the words and look the look and what, talk the talk without walking the walk, right? And so that is I've read this theory, and it sounds kind of plausible. I mean, there's not a whole lot of historical evidence because we don't really know what the what the
tactics were
practice. Right. Yeah, the practices of the Templars were never really shared.
Okay, I'll just say this: I tend to doubt that, and here's why: is that because martial arts in those times they weren't very sophisticated like that, right? You weren't really going to train your soldiers on how to, evade, survive, and eventually be recovered, because no one cared. You as a soldier, as a knight, were completely and totally expendable. You literally were a pawn on the chessboard, and your loss was nothing to your lord. It was, these huge battles would happen, and thousands of men would die on a field, and people just went, shrugged their shoulders and walked away, and they didn't all die instantly like in the movies where they get stabbed once, they fall down and go, oh, that's it, I'm out. They're dying in horrible misery slowly as they bled out on a battlefield. And so surely there are people that are alive, that could probably be taken prisoner or something like that. No one cares. They just left them sit there and die, and if they survived on their own, fine, whatever. But I think they were an afterthought. I think that the martial arts stopped at how to fight. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, maybe.
And then I think, anything else, like they're not really out. It's not a band of brothers in that way. Do you know what I'm saying? I don't think those ideas really come into practice in the martial arts until probably into the 19th century, actually. Maybe you could make an argument for the late 18th century, but certainly in the 19th century is the first time that you really see that stuff where actually it's valuable to pick up your comrade, So,
well, yeah, I was thinking of it more like a more like an intelligence kind of thing.
Yeah, like again, but again, they didn't really do that. Their intelligence. So intelligence, the practice of it would have been way different than what we know now. So, for example, I talked about this a couple shows ago. That book I read on John Dee, the Queen's magician. Well, he was the Queen's magician, but really it was just slang for spy master. Mm-hmm. And while they did communicate, like they would gather intelligence and they would communicate in code, written codes and things like that. Again, all of those people are disposable. All those links in the chain, it didn't matter to them. Mm-hmm. If you're captured, killed, tortured, okay, move on to the next. Bummer. But that's also because the means of communication were so slow that a lot of times your source of information was so short-lived, not just because of the fact that like people got caught a lot, but also because it took so long to communicate back and forth that you might get 1-2 messages back and forth and you're done, before you're out before that person's out of a position.
Yeah. So the only reason I'm sticking to my guns on this is the idea of the taxidermy. Basically the way that Baphomet is described in this testimony, it's like a medieval jackalope. Right. It's like a, right.
Yeah.
I've got the head of a cat and
Yeah. But I don't know. See, I could explain that away. I think I explained that away with like that was, no, it's common. It's common in the Middle Ages and in medieval times. It's really common for, especially the Western thought, to think of demons as sort of amalgams of, mismatched animals, right? Mm-hmm. And I think, and I was going to bring this up, like it's interesting that, and this doesn't come until later with the goat, that Baphomet becomes the goat. But why the goat? Why is the goat always the evil thing, right? And I think you probably know it. Yeah. I think it starts with the cloven hooves, right? and cloven hooves being bad. They're not kosher, correct?
No, actually, they are kosher.
Or they are kosher.
They are kosher.
So maybe that maybe makes my point even more.
In fact, yeah,
your God, not mine.
To be kosher, an animal has to have a cloven hoof, but it also has to chew its cud, which is why pigs aren't kosher.
Hey, there you go. Right. And why cows are.
Yeah.
Okay.
And why horses aren't, but
yeah. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. But I mean, like, how did the poor goat get so screwed on this one? You know? But I think it's the mishmash. It's the fact that I mean, if you're not a farmer and you've never seen a goat skull before, you know what I'm saying? It's going to be scary. A lot like how people would confuse Western explorers confused elephant skulls for cyclops skulls. When you've never seen something and you just see its skull, you draw whatever conclusion you want to off the picture of that skull.
Yeah, I think I have a feeling that the whole goat thing comes from somebody's god, like somebody in the ancient Middle East. You know, the Hittites or Syrians or someone had a god with the head of a ram.
Oh,
and that
right,
and that that's how we get sort of goat equals demon.
Yeah, maybe.
But this idea, so like this guy, this image of the Baphomet, right, doesn't really happen until late in the 1800s.
Yeah.
Right. So there's this guy, a French occultist named Alphonse Louis Constant, better known to us as Eliphas Levi. And he draws this goat-headed god as a representation of balance in the universe, right? So it's half human, half animal. It's half male, half female. The right hand is pointing up to heaven, which is good, and the left hand is pointing down, which is evil. So it's, like everything in this image, right? You've got the Asclepius with the black snake and the white snake, and the the legs are crossed. So it's
you've got the sun and the moon.
The sun and the moon. Yeah. Right. So so that was his sort of his conception of this Baphomet, and the idea was that it was never meant to be the devil. It was never meant to be Satan in Levi's eyes. It was meant to be the symbol of balance. Alan Salmi brings up a really interesting point, right? Which is, let me see if I can get it up here on the screen. I can't.
Listen.
Software.
Richard Vere just Googled it, and there's a taxidermy rat Baphomet for sale.
Nice.
Order up.
But Alan points out that the goat connection to the god Pan, which was an early competitor of Christianity.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Makes total sense, right? Bacchus.
There you go.
Right?
100%. Okay. Yeah. Great point.
Thank you, Alan.
Yep. Alan, your point stands.
Yeah. And so
you get a Cupid doll.
And so so here's the question that I asked when I was kind of doing all this research and stuff was,
sure,
how does this goat symbol, this Baphomet, get connected to a bunch of guys who are building cathedrals in the Middle Ages? Like, how did they get connected with Freemasonry?
Because Levy and then by extension Crowley. That's my guess.
Yeah,
that's my guess, right?
Yeah. Well, it's a good guess.
No. Well, but it's not, because we got to go back. Because really, isn't Baphomet called out by name in the Taxel hoax?
Yes.
All right. So
Taxel hoax is later. Taxel hoax is like the 1890s or 1860s.
Yeah, and Crowley doesn't come along until later, so it's not Crowley's fault. So damn it, can't blame him for this one. I don't. I think it's a great question. What's your theory?
So in the 18th century, right, in the 18th century, Freemasonry spreading wildly around Europe, right? The Masons on the continent actively were trying to create a link, some kind of linkage between Freemasons who are ecumenical, right?
Sure.
They're ecumenical. They're not
Mm-hmm.
they're not towing the party line to either Catholics or Protestants, and the good old Knights Templar, right?
Mm-hmm.
And my guess is that the Templars appealed to them for a number of reasons, right? So, like the Freemasons, right? They had ceremonies and initiations that were secret. Right?
Mm-hmm.
They
Mm-hmm.
operate independently from church authority, which to a bunch of guys who are, who are living in, a France that is completely authoritarian, and this is the divine right of kings age, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you had basically the first estate and the second estate, and that was it, and everybody else could go get bent, right?
Mm-hmm.
That had to be enormously appealing to them. Someone who was a group of men, namely the Templars, who were allowed and able to operate and develop wealth that they controlled, that was independent of church authority.
Yeah, right.
And then they also had these, a reputation to have these peculiar doctrines that are considered heretical,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I can see how in the 18th century, if you're an esotericist, the
Yeah, sure.
Templars, it's
Yeah.
a pretty good, gig, right?
All right, I get it. Yeah.
And so they saw in the Templars also a form of Gnosticism, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
there were these early attempts to sort of rehabilitate Baphomet by claiming it as some kind of cipher, right? So you had these guys
sure.
who were like kind of into alchemy
Mm-hmm.
and stuff like that, who and I read one account that said that it was an acronym meaning Basileus Philosophorum Metallocorum,
Yeah. Okay.
Metallurgicum, which
Mm-hmm.
means the king of metallurgical philosophers. I don't know. It
Yeah.
sounds like a stretch to me.
I was going to say that's you need a pretty big shoehorn for that. God
Yeah.
bless you.
Yeah.
I think that Levy's interpretation of it, I think that his drawing of it is that pushing towards that.
Yeah.
Because it's more of a hermetic, as above, so below deal. And so I think that it's not quite as far as it's alchemical, but it's getting there. The hermeticism certainly is there. And I think that Masonry, I think especially in the early part of the 19th century, they were really into esoterics. I think that the study of esoteric religious philosophy was a big deal to them, because you're not allowed to do that stuff in the church. Most of these guys are good Christians, and at that point, really, it means, for the most part, you're either sort of a conservative Protestant or you're a Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
And neither of those religions look kindly on the practice of esoteric religious stuff. And so this was a safe place for them to kind of explore that and to find the roots of their beliefs, to answer questions that they've probably had. And they probably saw this much in the same vein. They would see exploration into esoteric religious philosophy, just like they saw exploration into hard science, right? In the vivisection of a dog. Well, it's gruesome, but it teaches us a whole lot about how organic matter works, how a living being operates. And so, like, they would have seen it both the same way. Yeah, it's gruesome, it's terrible. But as long as we keep it down, but as long as we don't, freak all out the neighbors, we should keep going on it, because it answers questions, right? It gives us a basis for where we are now, and maybe where we're going. So maybe I'll buy that.
Yeah. So then Another interpretation that I read was that Baphomet was shorthand for Baphometus, or baptism of wisdom. And I will admit my Greek is horrible, non-existent.
Okay.
But I did manage to look at some translations sources, and Baphe means like stain or coloring, anointing.
Sure. Yeah. Okay.
So like the stain, the stain of the goddess Metis,
Mm-hmm.
who is the Greek goddess of skill.
Right.
That's a bit of a stretch to me.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Like,
no.
yeah.
No.
And then there was a more recent one that was kind of interesting. So there was this guy, a Dead Sea Scrolls scholar named Hugh Schoenfeld.
Mm-hmm.
And what he did is he applied the Kabbalistic Adabash cipher
Mm-hmm.
to it and came up with something interesting. Now, the Adabash cipher is this code where you take a word, and the way that the cipher works is you have, Aleph through Tav, right? Because it's Hebrew alphabet.
Sure.
And the Kabbalists were like famous for using all kinds of ciphers like this and stuff like that. And it was a way for them to kind of delve into a piece of scripture and say, well, what this says is that, God had breakfast with Jacob and had bagels and stuff. But what it really means is, if you put it through the cipher, it's. And so what happens is Aleph becomes so the Aleph is the first letter, Tav is the last letter. You transpose the two. So everywhere you read an Aleph, you substitute a Tav. Everywhere you read a Bet, you substitute a Shin, and so on and so on and so on until you meet the middle of the alphabet.
Right.
When you do that, Baphomet becomes Sophia, right? Which he interpreted as wisdom, right? From the Greek Sophia.
Okay.
Except that Sophia is a Hebrew name, right? So back in the day, before, like, just a little bit before Jesus, Jews were really busy Hellenizing themselves, and Sophia becomes a name, and Sophia is a very common Jewish girl's name, but it's spelled with a samech, not a shin.
Yeah. Well.
So it doesn't,
These are trivial details, Eric.
Well, that's exactly. And then Sophia, so that I said, all right, well, maybe it's something else, right? So I looked at Sophia. What does Sophia mean? Well, it doesn't mean anything, except in Arabic it means Sophia, right?
So that's what it was.
So why would Kabbalists take a Greek name, translate it into Arabic, then run it through an Adabash cipher just so we could get to Baphomet? It just seems
it's all about the divine plan.
It seems like
clearly.
It seems like the ancient equivalent of playing Revolution 9 backwards to find out that, Paul is really dead.
Yep. That's exactly what this is. That is exactly what that is. Right. That's too bad.
So thanks to Eliphas Levi, the image of the Baphomet makes it onto tarot cards, makes it into the Golden Dawn. It makes its way to Aleister Crowley.
It's everywhere.
A bunch of crazy cats.
Yep.
And they would have gotten away with it too if it hadn't been for those meddling kids. Right.
Yep.
And then, from Crowley, so Crowley called himself, the Beast, 666, stuff like that.
Yep.
And the wickedest man in the world. And then it's just a very short jump from that to, he was a Satanist. In fact, today you can still, like, if you Google Aleister Crowley, you'll find lots of references that he was a famous Satanist, and he really wasn't.
He wasn't at all.
Right. And so that's kind of how Baphomet becomes this stand-in for the devil. Right. And he's just become this. It's funny because no one's ever really questioned it. Right. Right. It's
a goat-headed human being kind of thing, right? Yeah. Of course not. Of course they're not going to question it. Also, I mean, not to be derogatory, but I'm going to catch all sorts of hell for this, but Christians aren't real good for asking a lot of questions.
Well, they're not encouraged to, right?
Exactly. That's exactly right.
Read the Bible, please.
No, that's for priests to interpret.
That's exactly. Yeah. So it's interesting that, like, this fragment of a confession extracted under torture back in 1307
right.
becomes this,
Right. Right.
becomes this, symbol of Satan that is
Yeah.
now
Mhm.
making its way onto the lawns of courthouses
Hilarious.
as a means of protest. I just think
Yeah.
that's kind of hilarious.
It is hilarious in
And
a lot of ways.
And it just shows you like the long circuitous journey that we take when we're sort of trying to sort of define the devil, and when we're not critical about like, well, one devil is as good as the next devil. It's all devils
Right.
to me, right? No,
Right. Right.
it's not. All right. So next up comes Lucifer, and Lucifer is much more interesting to me. I think like that was
Me
a much
too.
more interesting thing to
I agree. I agree.
yeah.
I
So
could not agree more.
Do you want to open the topic?
Sure. So I don't. I'm unsure of where to start. So Lucifer. Let's start at the obvious and work ourselves down to the not so obvious. So Lucifer, in a lot of ways, is used as the name of Satan in Christian tradition. And it could be argued that today, Lucifer and Satan are synonymous, right? The two sides of the same coin. But that's not actually always true. Uh, Lucifer has got a really interesting beginning, and it goes way, way back. Lucifer. I want to look this up. I want to give you the actual translation of the word. Let's see. It actually refers to Venus. It refers to the morning star.
It means light bringer.
There you go. And here I'll give you it means light bringer in Greek. Actually, it means dawn bringer. I take that back.
Actually,
in
no,
Greek.
It's Latin. It's Latin. So
right.
The Greek.
Light bringer. Oh, that's right. Latin is light bringer, corresponding to the Greek name, which means dawn bringer. For the same, and it means the same thing. It's the same planet,
which is phosphorus.
Correct.
Phosphorus is the Greek word.
There you go. Right. And so, and it all has to do with Venus being the morning star. Venus is so bright in the sky that you can see Venus in the morning, and that's been known since ancient times that star was different. So let's see. A lot of that ancient tradition about Venus goes to stories of someone who's on high and falls. Why? You can figure it out yourself. It's the morning star. That the planet descends on the horizon in the morning, and as the day goes on, it falls down the horizon until it disappears. And so all of the ancient stories had to do with someone who had a high position, a holy position, and fell in some way to the underworld, to ruin in some way. And so that story gets itself repeated and repeated and repeated through the lens of different religions in time and different countries. And it ends up spitting out into the King James Version, where it's traditionally associated with an angel who is the head of all the angels. He's number 2 to God, and he decides to strike off on his own because he has a disagreement over how much God loves humanity. And so he sets off on his own to destroy humanity and to create his own paradise, opposite that of God's. And that's his fall. He's kicked out of heaven, and he becomes the opposite of God.
Okay, so let's go back for a second. So let's talk about Venus for a second. So what happens with Venus is that Venus in the morning rises. It starts to rise, right, in the sky, and it's very bright.
Right.
and it rises and rises and rises. And just when it seems like it's going to get to the top, what happens?
It falls.
It doesn't fall. The sun.
Oh, it disappears. Sorry,
disappears.
You're right. It eclipses. You're right.
Eclipses, right? So that's how Venus falls, right? So when Venus in its aspect is actually setting, it's called noctifer in Latin.
That's right.
Which means night bringer.
Correct.
So there's Lucifer, light bringer, noctifer, darkness bringer.
And in my opinion, you want a devil? Noctifer. That's cool.
Yeah.
Darkness bringer.
Yeah.
That's bitchin'.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
So
that might be my new heavy metal band name.
Yeah. So in Hebrew, the word Venus is called Hallel. Hallel. And Hallel, interestingly, was also a Canaanite god who supposedly battled the Canaanite god called El.
Correct.
And was thrown to earth during the battle.
Correct.
Now, it's a little bit controversial. Not all scholars of Canaanite religion sort of agree with this, but that's one of the stories. It's one of the myths that's told about
Sure.
El. And El, of course, is the El of God, right? So El is one of the El Shaddai or El Elyon, right? El means God in Hebrew. Elohim is the sort of the plural. So El sort of makes its way into Israelite religion from Canaanite religion. And it's kind of the same God. It's interesting. Like if you go to the, so in Chicago here, we have the Oriental Institute, which is it's the ancient, it's the archaeology department at the University of Chicago. And incidentally, it's sort of it's supposedly where like Indiana Jones, hung his hat.
Right. Yeah.
From a university perspective, it's considered one of the top archaeology programs in the world.
Right.
And so there's a museum called the Oriental Institute, and you can go there, and it's actually know the guy who runs it. He's a friend of mine, and he it's an incredibly fascinating museum because you have all of the you actually have tablets in there where they mention characters that show up in the Bible, in the wars and things like that. There's a piece of stone that they have with cuneiform on it that basically says, I am King Sennacherib who defeated Hezekiah, the king of Israel, Hezekiah,
yeah.
Right. And, but received, 300 talents of silver. Now, interestingly, in the Bible, it says that Hezekiah paid 50 talents of silver, but when it got to the Assyrians, it was 300 talents of silver. Right. So you can kind of see, right.
Sure.
It's very interesting, but you can see that tablet. It's actually on display there. And
that's
one
really
of the
cool.
Things and one of the things that you can see there as well is a statue of El. You can see see what El looks like. Hang on one second. But here's where it gets interesting. So Hallel, morning star, appears in the Bible in several places. It first appears notably in Isaiah, right? And in Isaiah 14:12, it says, how you have fallen from heaven, O day star, son of the morning, how you are cut down to the ground, you who did cast lots over the nations, right? And so it's not referring to Babylon. I'm sorry, it's not referring to the devil. It's referring to a Babylonian king, probably Sennacherib, right? And who later becomes a pesher for Caesar, right? In Roman times.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. Sure.
And so, and I should probably stop here and explain what a pesher is. So a pesher is it's kind of like an allegory.
It's a stand-in.
It's a stand-in, right? It's when you say something and everybody knows exactly who you're talking about, but they use a different phrase for it. So for example, when we say the White House released a statement today, right? The House The House didn't release a statement,
Right.
right?
That's right.
We know that it's
Mhm.
the presidential administration released a statement,
Correct.
but we call it the White
Right.
House. Is that
Right.
so that's kind of the like how a pesher works. So when you read, for example, in the New Testament, when Jesus refers to himself as Son of Man,
Mm-hmm.
right? Son of Man in Hebrew was, Ben Adam,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? Son of Adam,
Of man. Right.
of
Mm-hmm.
man, of the human, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so it was sort of a stand-in for humanity. It was
Mm-hmm.
like basically that's kind of what it meant.
Mm-hmm.
And so the Messiah, the word Messiah, right, means anointed one. Well, that was a
Mm-hmm.
pesher for David, right? Because
Right.
David was
Mm-hmm.
anointed by Samuel to become
Right.
king of Israel,
Mm-hmm.
right? So whenever someone says the Messiah, right, that's what everybody knew at the time. Like so here's the thing, like, and this is just sort of an aside, but it's kind of an interesting one. So if you read the New Testament, right, Jesus, who just celebrated a
Mm-hmm.
birthday not too long ago,
Right.
right?
Congratulations. 2019 years old. Good
Right.
for you.
But when you read the Gospels, it says, well, he was descended from David. And
Yep.
and they go to great, I think, I can't remember which gospel it was, but there's a gospel where they go to great pains to say, okay, and then, Jesse
I
had
want to say,
David, and
I want,
David had
yeah.
this, and like it goes through the whole genealogy to get till you get to Jesus. Well, why is it important? Well, it's important because if he's the Messiah,
He's got to have
better be of the
lineage.
David. Yeah, he better
That's
have
right.
lineage, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I want to say it's Mark, but I'm probably
Right.
wrong.
So
Yeah.
so when someone says about Jesus, well, he's the Messiah, he's the Moshiach, he's the
Mm-hmm.
anointed one.
Mm-hmm.
If you're Roman and you hear that, that's that would be like a Kennedy saying, "I'm running for president," right?
Yeah.
Like
Absolutely.
a
Yeah.
Kennedy or a Bush who says that, you take it
Mhm.
seriously, right?
Yeah.
Because
Absolutely.
they've done it before, they have the means, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of this dynastic claim, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so in Isaiah, when the morning star appears, it's this pesher for a Babylonian king. So the idea is that this king of Babylon rises. I think his name was, what was his name? Belteshazzar.
Balthazar.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then he's brought low by the Babylon is creamed by the Persians, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
and so that was kind of a writing that the children of Israel used to basically say, hey, look, if you think you're going to get as high as God, which is sort of represented by the sun,
Mm-hmm.
you might get high, but you're not going to get, you're eventually going to get your light is going to get eclipsed by heaven.
Right.
Right?
And Balthazar, Balthazar was the son of Nebuchadnezzar II.
Yeah, exactly. And
So
it only took like two other kings, right?
Mm-hmm.
Nebuchadnezzar II was pretty powerful, and by the time you get to Belshazzar, it was
Yeah, and it says
kind of a mess.
Yeah. I'm just catching up to you here, and it says the Abrahamic scriptural text could be interpreted as a weak usurping of true kingly power and a taunt at the failed regency of Balthazar.
Mm-hmm.
So, here's Nebuchadnezzar II, who had built this incredible empire, and then his son comes in and screws it all up.
Yeah.
That's kind of terrific, actually.
Yeah, so that's Lucifer. So Lucifer in the earliest representations is basically a Babylonian king who got two big britches.
Yeah, right. Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, it's that idea of, great potential wasted, right?
Yes.
And that kind of connects all of these different stories.
Yeah. And this is one of those things, kind of like Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey.
Yeah,
this is one of those stories that happens over and over and over again, right? Icarus, right?
There you go.
Fly too high.
Yep.
Right.
Too close to the sun.
Too close
you
to
get
the
burned.
sun, right?
Yep.
There's the Sumerian myth of Etana.
There you go.
Who teaches the eagle how to fly, and he flies too high, and and falls to earth, right? And so that's kind of what and Venus is a symbol in all of these ancient
Right.
religions as sort of the epitome of hubris,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
so then you get in the first book of Enoch, right, in
Mm-hmm.
chapter 87, describes these stars who are cast down from the heavens and whose arms and legs are bound,
Hmm.
right? And
Mm-hmm.
now here's what's interesting about that. Since when do stars have arms and legs? Right? So clearly stars is a pesher, is a metaphor for people of high station,
Correct.
right?
Right.
And so then we get to the beginnings of the idea of Lucifer as a rebellious angel, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is
Mm-hmm.
found, the earliest references to that are found in the second book of Enoch,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which it's really interesting. So when we think of the book of Enoch, right, we're always
Mm-hmm.
talking about the first book of Enoch. That was written kind of before the Common Era,
Right.
right?
Mm-hmm.
But the second book of Enoch doesn't show up until much after the Common Era starts,
Mm-hmm.
after Jesus has kind of died, been resurrected. They're already like Christian communities, early Christian communities, and so there's speculation that the second book of Enoch is a early Christian text. And what's interesting about it is that we only have it because it was found in Coptic. So there's no original Greek translations that have been found. There's no Hebrew translations that have been found. It's been transcribed from the Coptic back into those other languages. But we
Right.
first in the second book of Enoch, in chapters 23 to 37, describes this episode where Enoch is brought through the various levels of heaven.
Mm-hmm.
And in that book, there's 10 levels of heaven, right? And when he gets to the 10th floor, where God's throne, actually, there's 12.
Mm-hmm.
There's 12. I take that back. There's 12. God sits on the 10th floor,
Right.
his heavenly throne. When he gets there, Enoch, who's now being guided by Gabriel, speaks with God in the 10th heaven face to face. And afterward, God anoints, he commands Michael, Archangel
Mm-hmm.
Michael, to anoint Enoch
Mm-hmm.
and becomes similar in appearance to the angels. So this is a
Right.
story of the apotheosis of
Right.
Enoch.
Of Enoch. Mm-hmm.
And then God tests the obedience of his angels by having them bow down before Enoch. And a group of angels identified as the angels of Satanael,
Right.
right?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Right? Which again really
Mhm.
just means adversary.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
Refuses, and they're imprisoned, and eventually they bow before Enoch, addressing him as a man of God. And there's this great passage, if you read this,
Mhm.
it's pretty graphic. Like what happened,
Right.
it's like, and they throw him in the jail, and they beat him, and they throw him against the
Right.
wall, and they,
Yeah. Right.
they get him in a headlock.
Right.
And it's like, it's really graphic as to what
Yeah. Sure.
gets done to
Sure.
these,
Right.
to
These
these
angels.
that are just
Uh-huh. Yeah.
being disobedient. And finally the
Right.
angels are like, uncle,
Fine.
enough of
Okay.
it. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Enoch
so
is awesome.
right. And so they bow before him as a man of God. So
Mhm.
later on in the book of Revelations,
Mhm.
right, you get this description of a war in heaven between the angels of Satan and the angels of
Right.
God. Right. Now, interestingly about this, and this is the kicker for me. Like when I saw this, I'm like, oh no, they didn't. Right. But in
Mhm.
Revelation chapter 22, verse 16,
Mhm.
guess who Jesus is referred to as?
Lucifer.
The morning star.
Right. Yep.
Right? It says, Jesus has sent mine angel to testify unto you these things in the churches. I am the root and the offspring of David and the bright and morning star.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so here's what I find really interesting about that, right? It's clearly there in the scripture, yet it's sort of like, yeah, but we're going to overlook that. We're going to sweep that under the rug.
Yeah, that part.
Yeah.
Not so much. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. In Luke chapter 10, that it says, I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven, which is always interpreted as, well, that's the morning star. There you go.
Yeah.
So, the fallen angel.
Yeah.
That's
And so I
mind
think,
blowing.
right.
But that's mind blowing.
Right. And so like, but Lucifer doesn't really like totally get connected to the idea of being Satan, right? Until 1667 with the publication of Paradise Lost, right?
There
John
you go.
Milton writes
Mhm.
this poem, gets a little carried away. I think he intended to write like a kind of a short little ditty, and it turned into like a multi-volume thing, right? That talks about
Happen to Homer, happens to the best of us.
this war in heaven,
Right.
right? And that's where we really get the first clear linkage that Lucifer is a rebellious angel who
Right.
makes war against
Yep.
God and is
Right.
cast out of heaven.
He
into
tells
hell.
the story.
Yeah. Yeah.
And doesn't he build off of Dante's Inferno?
No. Well,
Because I thought
yes,
he
yeah,
builds off of it, but the thing is that he tells the backstory,
yeah,
which is really funny.
the origin story. It's
Correct.
like the Marvel universe, right?
Right. Absolutely.
And
That's
so,
super interesting.
right? And so that I've always found that really, really interesting because again, it was a work of fiction,
Mm-hmm.
yet it was, it was claimed to have been divinely inspired.
Sure.
And now we've got this like clear linkage that Lucifer equals,
Right.
Satan equals fallen angel equals devil
Right.
equals demon equals
Right.
right. And so you get all
Sure.
of these like linkages that people just assume because it's like,
Mhm.
like, yeah, well, and the way that you do that is you have to presuppose that the devil is real and the devil exists. And then
Correct.
you start looking for evidence. Oh,
Correct.
there's a fallen angel. That's the devil. Oh, there's a
Mhm.
snake in the garden. That's the devil.
Right.
Right.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
Right. All right. So let's talk about the snake in the garden. Right.
All right.
So the snake in the garden in Hebrew and in Judaism is the snake in the garden.
Mhm.
Right. It's not the devil.
Okay.
It's not Satan.
No.
It's not even, he's not even there as a Satan.
No.
Like we talked about the idea of Satan, like in the last
That's right.
show about
He's there as a temptation.
Well, actually, strangely, he is there as knowledge.
Well, right, but
As knowledge.
wait, isn't that the tree? The tree is the knowledge, and the fruit
Yeah,
it
who's
bears.
in the tree?
I understand that. He is the temptation, because God specifically says, "Listen, there are no rules but this one," and so he represents the temptation to break that rule, right?
No.
All right, no, that's why I ask. Okay, no,
Yeah.
no.
So,
Okay,
well,
let's.
I mean, yes and no.
Okay,
Right.
all right.
So what, what's interesting about the story is that if you read it very closely and you follow it very closely, it kind of makes sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't like, so look, there's a lot of problems with the story, right?
Right.
And this is something I've always struggled with, even when I was a kid, like hearing this story.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Like, this is like,
Sure.
this is
right.
God being kind of jerky, like,
Yeah, totally.
right. So God creates man and woman,
Huh?
and then separates them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And originally the idea was that Adam, which means earth, right?
Mm-hmm.
Adam actually means red, like the red clay that he was made from. And Adam was both male and female. And since God had made male and female everything else, he said, it's probably not a great thing for him to do. So we'll correct that. And he causes Adam to fall asleep and separates.
Right.
It says plucks his rib.
His rib.
The word rib and the word side is the same word in Hebrew.
Right.
So it pulls a side.
Pulls
out
a
of
side.
Adam.
Correct.
What
And that's
side?
his
The
female side.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So now he says, he sets them in the garden. He says, you can eat from any tree, but don't eat from the tree of knowledge, because if you do, you're going to know what it is to die. He doesn't say, I'm going to kill you.
Well, right.
He says,
Correct.
you will know what it is to die. You will know. You will know.
Right.
Right. All right. So does an animal know that they're about to die? Probably not. Maybe. Do they reflect on it? Do they have knowledge of it? No. They may be experiencing it.
Right.
But do they have knowledge of it? Probably not.
No.
Right? So Eve's walking around the garden, right? There's the tree of knowledge. There's nice looking fruit on there, which, by the way, was not an apple. Apples are American.
That's
right?
correct.
Right? It was probably a pomegranate.
Ooh, actually, apples aren't American. Aren't they Armenian?
Yeah, you're right. Sorry.
All right. There
Armenian.
you go. Okay.
Probably it was a pomegranate. And the reason it was a pomegranate is because when you break open a pomegranate, it's got
all these
seeds.
Right.
And it was always thought like the pomegranate is a Kabbalistic symbol of God's commandments because there's supposedly 613 seeds in a pomegranate, right? That's knowledge. That's the Torah, right? So, so there's the fruit is growing on the tree, and who should be in the tree but the serpent? The serpent has always been a symbol of knowledge.
Correct.
Right. And
wisdom.
So, so it says in the Bible, it says, now the serpent was the most subtle of the creatures. Right. And he says, so Eve says, I can't eat the fruit because I'll die. And the serpent quite correctly says, you're not going to die if you eat the fruit. You're going to know, you're going to have knowledge. Right. And so, cause here's the thing. Why would God put someone in the garden and say, don't eat this fruit? Cause you're going to die, knowing it's a lie. Like,
wait a minute, let me give you the Catholic answer. He's got ways. Shut up. Stop asking questions.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
Or what he would say is it's to test the free will. Right. But
that's, by the way, that question right there would have gotten me kicked out of class multiple times. Yeah.
No. And that was, during the brief period of my life where I became an atheist, right. That was how I justified it. Why would God lie to humans and say, if you eat this fruit, you're going to die. And then they eat it. And then they don't, like, it doesn't make any sense. Like right. God doesn't need to, he's God. He doesn't need to lie. Right. Well, he didn't. He said, you will know death. Right. And so what the serpent says to Eve is that, like, no, if you eat this, your eyes will be opened. You'll be like God is.
Sure.
Right.
Right.
So Eve
Exactly.
goes, well, I like God, he
seems to have a pretty good position in life.
Yeah.
Right.
And so she eats the fruit and her eyes are opened. And the first thing she does is she runs over to Adam and she says, you got to try this. This is great. Like, I ate this and I know all kinds of stuff now.
Right.
And so Adam's like, okay.
Sure.
Right. And so then, then it says that, cut to God is walking in the cool of the afternoon, right. In the garden. Right? He's taking his afternoon constitutional.
His siesta. Right. His siesta. Yeah. Uh-huh.
And he's like, where's Adam and Eve? And he says, Adam and Eve. And they're like, yeah, listen, we can't come out because we're naked. And he's like, what? Who told you you were naked?
There you go.
Well,
right.
Well, hamana. And then God's like, did you eat the fruit that I told you not to eat? Now, if you were a parent, right, and you said, don't eat this, I'm putting a bowl of Reese's on the table, but don't eat it.
Right.
Why would you do that to a child? Why would you do that?
It's called point proofing. It's called discipline.
It's just
saying, it's discipline.
It's mean to a child? No.
It's discipline.
To an adult, maybe.
Yeah, it's teaching a child discipline.
It's
consequences.
To me, it's meaning.
You've taught a child cause and effect without having to let them burn their hand on a stove, right?
No, you've done something much worse. You've taken somebody who doesn't have the capacity because they don't have knowledge. They don't know from good and evil, right? They don't know that what they're doing is wrong because they don't know. They don't have knowledge of good and evil. So God says, don't do this. And they do it. Well, why wouldn't they do it? They're animals. Right. They're ignorant, right?
But they have no knowledge.
They have no knowledge.
It's a good point.
It's only after fair. So I'm thinking to myself,
right.
what kind of God does that? Well, that's not what happened. What happened was, is he said, you will know.
Right.
Right. And he says, what did you do? What did you ate the fruit, didn't you? What did you do? And Adam's like, totally throws Eve under
She
the
did
bus,
it.
right?
She did it.
She gave me the fruit and I ate it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. God turns to Eve. He's like, what did you do? Well, the serpent told me that I wouldn't die.
Right.
And then he goes into this whole speech and he says, because you did this, right, here's what your life's going to be like. And he's giving them knowledge. He's giving them knowledge of
That's right.
You're going to have to work. You're going to know death. You're going to bear children in pain. You're going to know what that's like. You're going to, and it's sort of like a parent, like, well, you did this. And because you did this, these are the consequences. And it sucks.
Again,
I feel bad for you, but there's nothing I can do about it now.
Again, this is the lesson: is that there are consequences.
There are consequences.
And when someone with more knowledge than you says, "Don't do something," that's why they're hoping that you can avoid the consequences.
Yeah. So once I kind of read it in that context, right?
Sure. Right.
Everything kind of made sense, and I'm like, oh. So this isn't like this, and this is why Jews don't have the idea of original sin, right?
Yeah,
because
right.
It's not a sin.
It's not a sin. Yeah, right.
It's normal, right?
Sure. Absolutely.
So, okay. So in Hebrew, the serpent, right, is a nachash. Nachash means snake.
Okay.
It's not, it's a different word. It doesn't have a sinister meaning to it. Nachash just means snake. And so in Exodus, Moses creates this thing called the brazen serpent. Right. It's a bronze serpent mounted on a stick. And the idea is that anybody, it's a magical talisman. Anybody who looks at it will be cured of snake bite. Right.
Awesome.
And it was sort of a symbol of knowledge. If you approach this symbol of knowledge and you gain knowledge over disease, you can be cured.
Right.
Right. And it's the beginning of the idea of the Asclepius, right?
Correct.
The snake
tissue snakes.
around the stick. Right. Yeah.
Right.
And so, but when you go to where they start talking about snakes, so there's another word, for serpent, right? Which implies a dragon, right? So like when you look at, Ezekiel, right. They talk about dragons that are kind of accosting Ezekiel. That word is seraph. So seraph is a winged fire-breathing dragon, right? But it translates, like when you get into the Greek, it translates into serpent as well. So it's a different kind of serpent. So the infernal, like, so Tiamat is this Babylonian goddess who is the goddess of chaos, and in Genesis, when they talk about the creation of the world, right, the world was without form and void, and darkness was on the face of the deep, and the darkness is portrayed as a serpent, as like a serpent swirling around,
Sure. Yeah, writhing.
It's a different kind of serpent than the Nachash, right? It's a different thing.
Sure. Right.
And in fact, when Moses creates the brazen serpent, right, the word in Hebrew is Nachash Nechoshet, right? So there's a pun there. So the word Nachat is Nachash. I'm sorry, Nachash is the serpent. Nechoshet is bronze, but Nechoshet is from the same root as the word, because it's about knowing how to make bronze, right?
Right.
So
okay.
It's a pun, and again, if anybody, I would encourage anybody who to learn Hebrew and then read the Bible in Hebrew, because there's tons and tons of puns in there, tons of them, lots and lots of
hilarious words. Actually. Yeah, that's awesome.
So that's interesting, because like once you, and this is sort of like, when I used to teach comparative religion, this is sort of the fundamental difference between the fundamental difference between Judaism and Christianity, is that Judaism does not regard this idea of a original sin, so there's no need to there's no need to
Repent or
you don't need a
be
savior.
absolved.
You don't need a
Right.
savior to save you from original sin. So the idea
Right.
of the Messiah
Right.
is that Messiah comes down to redeem Israel. He's sort of a political figure, right? And that's different than the Christian Messiah, which is more of a spiritual Messiah.
Right.
Okay, so Abe Metz brings up an interesting point, right? Learn real Hebrew, not Pike's bastardized version. So let's talk about Pike for a second, because Pike and Lucifer they cross paths, right?
That's correct.
So tell me about Pike. You probably know more about this than I do.
I don't. But all right, let me read you I'll read you from Morals and Dogma. Let's see. I don't know if I have it. Oh, I don't have it. I thought I had he basically speaks about the Luciferian path, the energies of Lucifer. Actually, and that's really the key there, is the energies of Lucifer, is a quote from him, where he breaks down what does Lucifer mean. It's the bringer of light. And so here's what Pike says: Lucifer, the son of the morning, it is he who bears the light, and with its splendors, intolerable blinds feeble, sensual, or selfish souls. Doubt it not. So that quote, taken out of context and put in bad context into Lucifer is evil, Lucifer is Satan, because that's my anecdotal evidence of what Lucifer is, means you're a Satan worshiper right there. It says it right there that you venerate Satan, when actually he knew damn well, and goes through what, here's what Lucifer actually means. Here's where it, here's where it comes in the Bible and all that, and then says, like, listen, that bearing of light, that's amazing. That's what we're looking for. Someone who bears light, brings light. And so he got much maligned for that. Thanks John Milton, screwing that all up for us. But that's the really big thing. And literally it's still used today. I mean, it is used all the time by fundamentalist Christians to say that Masonry is actually devil worship. And it plays right into the Taxel hoax.
Yeah, and I remember when I was first interested in becoming a Mason, and I was kind of hanging out on Usenet.
Yeah,
people were using the word Luciferian a lot, right? Luciferian, and I never quite understood what that term meant, but it actually has a very specific meaning. And I think it has to do with Gnosticism.
Correct. Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So was Pike a Gnostic?
No. But he definitely studied it. I think that Pike would have seen himself as a Christian, as a straight up Christian. But he would have seen himself as a much more knowledgeable Christian. And would have seen himself in terms of almost being as knowledgeable as like a really well-respected rabbi, right? Where a really well-respected rabbi is looked on as, oh, you've studied so much, and you've studied it broadly, so that you've given your religious beliefs context, right?
Mm-hmm. And
he would have thought of himself like that, but he still would have thought of himself as Christian.
Okay.
For sure. But he would have definitely thought of himself as a much smarter Christian than other people. I was going to read this to everyone. I read this to you before, and I just thought it was really interesting and I've never heard of Bogomilism. But it was a short thing here. It was from Wikipedia about Lucifer that I find fascinating. In the Bogomil and Cathar text Gospel and the Secret Supper, Lucifer is a glorified angel and the older brother of Jesus, but fell from heaven to establish his own kingdom and became the demiurge. Therefore, he created the material world and trapped souls from heaven inside matter. Jesus descended to earth to free the captured souls. In contrast to mainstream Christianity, the cross was denounced as a symbol of Lucifer because it was his instrument in an attempt to kill Jesus. So, I mean, there are all these different, like, do you see what I'm saying? Like, everything's different. And everything tends to be bastardized. It's when you look at a long lens of history, Lucifer is the perfect example of the telephone game, right? Lucifer goes from one thing to another, to another, to another, to another, to another, slowly being bastardized through history. And I think that's interesting, and I think why this topic was so interesting in general, because I think this is a really good example of the telephone game of history.
Okay. Yeah. The other thing that I kind of started looking up Luciferianism, and I don't know very much about Gnosticism. That would be probably another show. But this idea of Luciferianism is this belief that venerates so something that you mentioned. You said you mentioned demiurge.
Right.
What does that mean? All right, I'm
screw this up. Yeah, I'm gonna screw it up. I could do it, but
so I think in Gnosticism there's this idea that there's like the real God, which is kind of a jerk,
right,
and then there's this sort of demiurge who's sort of what we would consider God, but God is not the God.
So in Platonic philosophy, the demiurge is the creator. It's the creator of the world.
Okay.
In Gnosticism, it's a heavenly being subordinate to the supreme being. So he's under God, but is considered the controller of the material world and antagonistic to all that is purely spiritual. So that kind of fits, right? That fits a semi-interpretation of Satan, or or the antithesis, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the demiurge would be fully material, and the supreme being would be fully spiritual.
Gotcha. Yeah, we're gonna definitely have to do a show on Gnosticism because it's kind of starting to go over my head a little bit here.
Yeah.
Alan is letting us know that he's got an in. He can get us. See if I can get this comment to show up. I don't know why this doesn't work the way it should. Oh, there you go. He can get it. He can get you a Gnostic bishop if you like.
Nice. Cool.
Cool.
That'd be interesting.
Yeah.
I know so little about Gnosticism. All right. Well, there you go. This is a good book, by the way. John Nagy just put on here "The Origin of Satan" by Elaine Pagels.
Oh, she's great. Yeah, Elaine
and I've heard rave things about this, and I've been meaning to read that book. But yeah, that's a very, very good book recommendation, and one that I'm going to take. And thank you, John, because that's on the list.
Yeah. So kind of wrap this up. So like,
right.
There's a couple takeaways that I have here. One is that was the takeaway that we made from the last show, which is that, you know, our bad guys are their good guys, right? And vice versa.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
But the second thing is that all of these different images of evil, of Satan, of devil, of Mephistopheles, of Old Scratch, I mean, whatever you want to call them,
Right.
right? They're all different, and they all come from different places, and it doesn't. None of them are consistent. There's no like consistent, and that's kind of, I think that's kind of what makes the devil a little bit fun, right? Is that he can kind of be anybody. He can be like young and good looking, or he can be like, you know, a big guy with horns, right? And so, but my question is like, why do people continually associate Freemasonry with all of this? I mean, we've got nothing, not a single thing in any of our rituals, any of our liturgy, any of our anything that would suggest that, look, I think that even the case for, like, you know, Gnosticism, I mean, look, aside from the fact that Pike didn't really know his Hebrew all that well, and he, you know, he took some liberty, and I put it this way,
he made a bunch up.
This way, he made the look. He wrote in the late 1800s. He knew, you know, like when he used the word Lucifer, he knew.
Oh yeah, absolutely, he did. He knew he was going to provoke the hell out of some people. And part of what he was writing was, I'm smarter than you. And it's also it's almost Pike was almost a hipster in my view, right? Mm-hmm. What he liked to do was to flex his muscle on, look at all the books I've read, look at how smart I am, look at all the connections I've made, and like, I even know that the thing that you think is the least cool in the world is the coolest. Like, that's the kind, right? It's like it's hipster Pike, and and that's like hipster the worst Pike thing in the world. Yeah,
there's an action figure that I want.
Isn't that awesome? Hipster Pike. Yeah. He still has the beard, but he's got a top knot.
Little man bun. Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. Uh-huh.
But yeah, so like, why does this
listen, I think that Freemasonry, well, really in a couple of ways, I can only speak from the Catholic point of view. I know exactly why Catholics just absolutely distrust and hate Freemasonry. One, there's no priest here, and we're talking about stuff like this, right? And when we talk about stuff like this, it leads to questions like what I said
are not what we want.
Right. Questions that would have gotten me kicked out of every religion class. And they would have been like, you did that on purpose. Shut up. Out. You're gone. You know, don't be sarcastic with me. And I would say, no, that's not sarcastic. This is an actual question. Like, do you not see how deep this question is? And that's where the anger is provoked, because they just don't know the answer to it. So thank you, Hipster Pike. But yeah, I mean, I think I think that's where it is, right? Too many questions.
That explains why Catholics object to Freemasonry. It doesn't necessarily explain why people want to associate the devil with Freemasonry. And I think it goes back to our first takeaway.
Yeah, right. There you go.
I think there it's because
other guys. Religion. Yeah. The other guy's bad. The other guy's good guy is the bad guy. Yeah.
They think that we're a religion. And if we're a religion, if we're a religion, then, you know, then it stands to reason that, you know, obviously whatever we're worshiping is not what they're worshiping, because what they're worshiping is the one true God.
Yeah.
Right.
Sure.
And so what if they're not worshiping the one true God, then anything else is the devil. Right.
Correct.
And so I think that's kind of why we get tarred with that brush all the time. It's like, if you're not,
makes sense.
It's basically, if you're not with us, if you're not doing what we say is orthodox or kosher or whatever, you know, if you're not worshiping in the way that we want you to worship, then you must be in league with the devil, right? And,
Right.
and this is the accusation that Protestants make against Catholics.
Mm-hmm.
This is the accusation that Christians make against Muslims, and that Muslims make against Jews, and that it's as old as the hills, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're doing something that is not sanctioned by us, then you are in league with the devil, and there can be no other explanation. And I think that's why we get tarred with that. And because we've always been somewhat secretive,
Mm-hmm.
we've never engaged with, put it this way, all we can really do is say, you know what, I've been a Mason for 20 years and I've
Right.
never seen anything
Right.
in this organization that would support that. Well, prove it. Well, I can't tell you. I can't tell you what's in there. I can't tell you what the rituals are.
Right. Yeah.
And even if I could, what I can say is, well, go on the internet, go look it up on the internet. It's all there, right?
Right. Uh-huh.
Oh, but that's not the real stuff. The real stuff is secret.
Right. But then again, I mean, that is the serpent eating its tail of conspiracy theorists, right? You can give them the truth all day and they'll say, but that's what you wanted me to believe. That's not the real truth. Okay.
Yeah. Right.
I mean, that works for anything. It's
Exactly.
just stupid. It's just
very-
stupid.
It's a convenient truth.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
That's absolutely right.
Truth.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think that's why but I think at the for anybody who might be listening to this, who's not a Mason, right. And who's concerned about this, right. I would just encourage them to understand, there was a time in our history where 1 in every 5 guys was a Mason. If we were truly up to no good, if we were truly, worshiping the devil, first of all, like anybody who is like a Jew would be like, that makes absolutely no sense, right? Because we don't have that idea, right? This idea
Correct.
of worshiping the devil. There's no
Right.
Satanism in Judaism.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, here's kind of an interesting fact. To be a Satanist,
Mm-hmm.
to be a Satan, like if you like,
Yeah.
forget the Church of Satan for a second, forget the Temple of Satan. If you are a Satanist, you are a Christian. Because
Well, yeah.
in order to worship Satan as an opponent
Sure.
of God, you have to buy into that whole theology to begin with.
Correct.
So
Yeah, there
you're
you go.
basically a rebellious Christian, right?
Right.
That's what
You
a
have to
Satanist is.
you have to believe in Christ to believe in the Antichrist.
Exactly, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
That goes to follow.
yeah,
Yeah.
so I would just sort of say, like, if that were truly the case, given the amount of like, America is one of the more religious countries in the developed
Yes.
world.
Yes.
It wouldn't have survived as long as it has if there was
Yeah.
something
That's
really
fair.
going on like that.
That's definitely fair.
Bud says, if Freemasons are trying to take over the world, I want to be on their side. Well, lucky for you, Bud.
I was just gonna say, and we could apply high ranking to you as well. So that's all right. We know high ranking
So
Masons.
that's kind of our exploration. Is there anything else to say on the subject? I think we're
No, I don't think so.
yeah.
I don't. I mean, there is, but they're whole other shows.
Yeah, I think so.
So
I think you're right.
yeah,
I think you're
yeah.
right.
So for now,
we'll wrap it up here. This is the part of the show where we thank our executive producers for making the show possible. Your generous support makes it so that we are able to have the equipment, the bandwidth that we need, and the ability to sort of bring you deep topics on Masonry. And so if you like what you hear and you want to hear more and you want to support us, please consider becoming an executive producer at our Patreon page. It's patreon.com/X-Oriente. And again, we thank all of our producers. And just to kind of give you guys some updates, I know there's a bunch of people who've become producers who haven't gotten their welcome packets, and we had to get some new materials. We got those new materials. They were terrible. Like, the printing job just blew chunks. And so we sent them back, and they're being remade. And so when they come in, I'm also taking this opportunity to get new pins made with the new logo. We're still kind of going through that thing. And actually what we're going to do is we have a couple of design candidates. We're going to put them on the Patreon page for the executive producers.
It's a great idea.
And
vote.
Vote. Yeah. Vote to which one you guys like.
Which seat is most comfortable?
Which seat? Exactly.
Which pin is more comfortable?
Exactly.
I love that. That's a great idea.
Yeah. And so, we've got some other great stuff planned for the next year. We're working on getting more guests and more schedules, and again, it's all due to our wonderful executive producers. One of the things that we're going to try to do is make more announcements on Facebook as to what the show topic is going into it. Be a little bit less last minute about it, so that you guys can plan to be here, because we do like the participation. And now that we've got the comments working, we can actually display your comments in the video feed as we do this. And so we'll continue to do that. And then also we're going to be next month is Masonic Week. It's happening in about a month. And I will be going to Masonic Week. Jason, you're already at you live in Masonic Week.
I do. It's great.
And we thought it would be kind of fun to do some podcasting while we're out here. So if you're going to be at Masonic Week and you'd like to meet up, let us know ahead of time so we can see what we can kind of pull together. If you're interested in attending Masonic Week, there is a page. We'll put it in the show notes. Basically you can Google Masonic Week 2020, and there's a York Rite information page that tells you all about it. You do not need to be a member of any of the bodies to attend. I've been going now for 16 years, and I stopped attending all the events pretty much after year 5. And it's kind of funny. Like, I'll attend events, but only when like a friend of mine or someone is like getting installed as a Grand Poobah and I want to show support. Otherwise, the real draw of Masonic Week is just the people that are converging on Washington, all the Masons from around the country that are converging on Washington at the same time. And it's great fun. So if you're able to be in Washington, that's one
time a year that I'll go to Shelley's.
Yeah.
Once.
For those who don't know, Shelley's is the cigar bar. It's one of 2 cigar bars, I think, that are legal in Washington, D.C.
Yep.
And it's the one that's kind of like a block and a half from the White House. So it's kind of like Rick's Cafe in Casablanca. Sooner or later, everybody goes to Shelley's.
Yep, that's true.
And so it's an interesting place to hang your hat. And so we'll be there and hope to see you there too. And what else you got? Anything?
That's it. That's all I got.
Cool. Well, thanks everybody. And we'll see you next time.
Bye, guys.
Bye. Fiat Vox.
Fiat Vox.